Once upon a time in the fertile and prosperous kingdom of Zamba, King Theos sat on the throne as a beloved ruler. For decades, he had led his people with wisdom, compassion, and a firm sense of justice. Under his reign, the kingdom thrived, its fields bountiful, its merchants wealthy, and its people content. The royal palace, situated on a hill overlooking the capital, was a magnificent fortress adorned with rare gemstones, marble floors, and gold-leafed ceilings. But King Theos' most precious treasure was not gold, nor the vast lands he ruled, it was the trust and love of his people. Among the king's most trusted servants was Garmas, a man who had served Theos for nearly 20 years. Garmas had risen through the ranks due to his apparent loyalty, intelligence, and dedication. He was responsible for the king's personal affairs, managing the household and overseeing other servants. To the outside world, Garmas appeared as the epitome of loyalty. But deep within, Garmas nursed a dangerous ambition, one that had grown unchecked for years. One fateful autumn, tragedy struck. King Theos, who had always been in good health, suddenly fell gravely ill. The royal healers were summoned from across the kingdom, bringing with them all manner of herbal concoctions, potions, and remedies, but nothing seemed to work. The king grew weaker each day, and soon he could no longer rise from his bed. Finally, after weeks of struggling, Theos fell into a deep coma, his body unresponsive but still breathing. The people of Zamba mourned, fearing the worst. Without an heir to take the throne and the king's condition uncertain, the kingdom was left in a state of confusion. The Council of Elders, a group of trusted advisors to the king, tried to maintain order and govern in his absence. But disagreements over how to handle the crisis caused tensions to rise. It was then that Garmas saw his opportunity. Late one night, as the moon hung low over the kingdom, Garmas convened a secret meeting in the darkest corridors of the palace. He had gathered the royal treasurer, several palace guards, and a few influential nobles who had grown discontent with the Council of Elders. With a sly smile, Garmas addressed them. "Friends," he began, his voice smooth like oil, "our beloved king is near death. The healers have failed, and the council dithers while the kingdom teeters on the edge of chaos. Zamba needs a strong leader, someone who can take decisive action." "But who?" one of the nobles asked. "Theos has no heirs." Garmas stepped forward, his eyes gleaming. "The kingdom cannot afford to wait for the council to bicker endlessly. For the good of Zamba, I will take the throne until the king returns to us, or until the inevitable happens." The guards and nobles exchanged uneasy glances, but Garmas had planned well. He had already bribed many with promises of wealth and titles, and for those still hesitant, he had prepared subtle threats. One guard, still unsure, spoke up. "But the king is not dead, Garmas. He could recover." Garmas' smile never faltered. "Perhaps. But if he does not? Will we allow the kingdom to descend into anarchy while we wait for a miracle?" His words struck a chord, and the room fell silent. Slowly, heads nodded in agreement, and the decision was made. By the next morning, Garmas would be the de facto ruler of Zamba. As dawn broke, Garmas appeared before the people of Zamba, dressed in the finest royal robes he could find. He stood on the palace balcony, looking down at the crowds gathered below. "People of Zamba," he called, his voice ringing out over the square, "our great king lies near death. But fear not. I, Garmas, his most trusted servant, shall guide you through these troubled times. I will act as king in his stead until he is well again." The crowd murmured in confusion. Some were skeptical. After all, Garmas was just a servant. But others, frightened by the uncertainty and the looming threat of chaos, began to believe his words. Who else could lead them in the king's absence? And so, with no clear opposition, Garmas took control. At first he moved cautiously. He retained the illusion of serving the king, always assuring the people that he was merely a temporary ruler until Theos returned to full health. But behind the scenes, Garmas wasted no time consolidating his power. He replaced key members of the Council of Elders with his own loyalists, surrounded himself with guards who were loyal to him alone, and began siphoning the royal treasury for his personal use. Weeks passed and Garmas grew more brazen. Lavish feasts were held at the palace, where Garmas entertained foreign dignitaries and powerful nobles. The royal vaults, once full of wealth and treasures, were steadily emptied to fund Garmas' indulgences. He began building monuments in his own honor, placing his name alongside that of King Theos in official documents and decrees. The people of Zamba, once prosperous, began to suffer under heavy taxes that Garmas imposed to fund his luxurious lifestyle. Farms were seized, homes were taken, and the poor were left to fend for themselves. Whispers of rebellion began to circulate among the people, but Garma's loyal guards quickly crushed any dissent. Yet even as he reveled in his newfound power, Garmas knew there were those who still remained loyal to King Theos. He kept the royal physicians on a tight leash, ordering them to make sure the king remained in his coma. The king's room was guarded night and day, and no one but Garmas and a few trusted servants were allowed near him. Despite Garma's attempts to keep King Theos incapacitated, there were still some within the palace who had not lost hope. A few loyal servants, led by the head royal physician, Elena, secretly worked day and night to find a cure for the king. They knew that if Theos could be revived, he would restore order to the kingdom and bring Garmas to justice. But time was running out. Garma's grip on the throne was tightening, and if Theos did not awaken soon, the kingdom of Zamba would be lost forever. Would King Theos awaken in time to save his people? Or would Garma's treachery go unpunished? As the weeks passed, the kingdom of Zamba continued to suffer under the weight of Garma's oppressive rule. What had once been a thriving land now resembled a kingdom in decay. The roads, once bustling with traders, had grown quiet. Farmers struggled to keep their land, while merchants could barely afford to keep their shops open. The people's discontent simmered beneath the surface, and it was only a matter of time before that anger boiled over. But in the darkest moments, hope remained alive. Deep within the palace, the royal physician, Elena, and a small group of loyal servants continued their tireless work to revive King Theos. They had discovered an ancient remedy, one said to heal even the gravest of illnesses. 4 days they administered the potion to the king, praying it would bring him back from the edge of death. And then, one fateful morning, a miracle happened. King Theos stirred. His eyelids fluttered, and after what seemed like an eternity, he opened his eyes. Elena, who had been by his bedside, gasped in shock and joy. "My king," she cried, rushing to his side. Theos' voice was weak, but there was a fire in his eyes. "What has happened?" Elena told him everything, how Garmas had seized the throne, drained the kingdom's wealth, and ruled with an iron fist. Theos' heart burned with rage, but his body was still too weak to act.